Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Chamber One-on-One series. I'm Brian Friedman, the Government Affairs Chair for the Chamber. Today, our event is sponsored by our friends at CenterPoint Energy, and I'd like to thank Paul Locke and the CenterPoint team for sponsoring us today. I'm excited to have with us Galveston County Judge Mark Henry. He was elected in 2010 and is the 28th county judge in Galveston County history. He served 21 years in the Air Force in classified space operations and taught at various military colleges throughout the United States. He's a fifth-generation Texan, born and raised in the Houston area and a graduate of the University of Houston. He's owned an aircraft parts business in Galveston County since 1995 and is an authorized seller to the U.S. government. Since being elected, Judge Henry's cut the county's tax rate every year he's been in office, totaling a reduction of over 24%, while paying off over 40% of the bonded debt in the county. Judge Henry's now serving his third, although that may be dated, his third or fourth term as county judge, and resides in League City with his wife, Amy, and their twin daughters. He's also the father of 3 adult-age children that live in the greater Houston area. So with that, I'd like to welcome Judge Henry to the stage.
Thank you, Brian. How's everyone this morning?
Doing well. Great to see you, and thanks for being here. Judge, the first question I have for you is a similar one that I asked to everybody who joins us. Can you share a little bit about your background and your journey into public service and your career leading up to that?
Sure. I was born at Herman Hospital in Houston, raised in Pasadena. My dad worked for a chemical plant as a sales manager. Went to Sam Rayburn High School in Pasadena. Started San Jacinto College as soon as I graduated. Started taking flying lessons about the same time. Fell in love with flying. Made an assumption that I would be a professional pilot all of my life. And while that's certainly been part of my life, it didn't go that direction, but great. Went to University of Houston to finish my degree. I started law school at South Texas College of Law, and I applied for the Air Force simultaneously. Well, I got picked up or accepted into law school and turned down by the Air Force my first time. So I started law school. Went for 2 semesters and said, I don't really like this. And I reapplied to the Air Force. I got selected the second time. So I left in January of 1989 for officer candidate school and became a second lieutenant May 4th of 1989. Went to flight school for about a year. They had no place to put me, so they sent me to space school after that in Denver, Colorado. Went to Colorado Springs for 4 years with every other second lieutenant in the Air Force Space Command at that time. Moved to Montgomery, Alabama, and left active duty in 95, transferred to the reserves, spent another 15 years as a reservist. Came back to League City in 95, bought a fixed-based operation, which is an airport fueling station in Galveston at that time. Started another one in Louisiana. Ran those for 10 years. Well, ran the one in Louisiana for 10 years. After I sold that, have been in the parts business the entire time, but someone called me from the Galveston County Republican Party and said, would you run for county judge? And I said, I guess. What does that mean? So that was 2009. That phone call came. I was on the ballot in 2010, got elected in November, took office 1st of January 2011. So that is the way that we got here from there, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can only imagine that sort of leadership skills and lessons that you got serving in the military and with a distinguished business career. Can you talk about some of those things you found handy as you've transitioned from, now government service to running and operating companies and now leading a large county?
The skills are twofold, and the first is discipline. Of course, the military is pretty big on discipline. When they tell you to do something, they expect you to do it. They don't expect any other thing to happen. And then I think one of the best things the military trains you for is absolute chaos. They will give you an assignment and they won't really know how to get it done. And that's up to you. And that's really up to certainly the enlisted corps in the military, and then the young officer corps as well. We are given an assignment and we don't care if we don't exactly know how to get it done, we will get it done. And that's been a great background, a great training platform for both business and for government work at the county level. Certainly during this pandemic, I mean, no one even talked about a pandemic before last year. And so there was no playbook. Hurricanes, we know hurricanes, we know exactly how to handle them. We just need to know how strong they are, where they're going to hit. But no one had a playbook for this stuff that's going on. So having that fog and friction of war, as they call it, or the complete chaos is another way to say it. was very helpful in getting us through, at least in Galveston County, a playbook or a scenario with no playbook to follow and just kind of have to make it up as we go. And we did probably as good as anybody could have hoped for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I sincerely appreciate, when we first met, it was on site at NASA. You've been a longtime supporter of both the defense side of space, but also the civilian and human spaceflight side of things. And so always great to see your enthusiasm about those industries and in that market. Shifting gears a little bit, and you mentioned it, the COVID pandemic, a lot going on. It seemed like during the summer, things were trending much more positively, and cases going down. That's turned around quite a bit. Can you talk a little bit about how it's going at the county, what you're focused on, what kind of metrics you're watching, and where do we go from here?
Sure, and we rely on some medical providers' input. We have a local health authority, Dr. Kaiser, and I work very closely together. And we have to laugh. I mean, I knew who he was. I'd met him a couple of times before February of 2020. And at this point, we have spent a lot of time together. The Galveston County, I would like to think, was a little different. And we were a little different because we had UTMB. For those who don't know, UTMB has got a biohazard level 4 lab on the island, one of the only ones that exist in the country, really. So they're not scared of viruses. They understand them. They know how to work with them. They do a lot of research there. I've toured that facility. It is impressive, to say the least. I've toured before COVID, and it's just a one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art kind of facility. So when this thing comes on the scene, we have a lot of local expertise in virology, not necessarily COVID, because there was no expertise at that time. But they were not intimidated. They weren't backing down from it. So as a result, we probably had one of the first viable tests that we could be administered here in Galveston County. Because of that, we were able to set up one of the best testing programs in the country, really anywhere else. We would have others come and kind of view what we had. And I hated to tell them, but look, if you don't have a UTMB partner, it's going to be far more difficult to execute on something like this. But we got it done. And we were probably in the May timeframe, May of 2020, when we were able to tell anyone, if you want to test, we have set the entire program up. It is free to you. Basically, the county's the pay or blast resort, so they get to try insurance, they get to try Medicare, Medicaid, they get to try other options. But if those all don't work out, then the county will pay for the test. And we had a very successful program. I remember doing an interview with a local TV station. I think that was in June or July of 2020. And I logged on during the interview and said, look, the wait time for you to get a test right now is 1 hour. So that was pretty good, because other people were experiencing 24 and 48-hour return times for their tests. So we move into the time when we get a vaccine on the scene. We have a conference call January the 5th of 2021, where the state said, you all need to be prepared to be able to administer mass vaccinations. And that's nothing that we had planned for. We did not know exactly what the vaccine rollout was going to look like. But I turned to my staff and said, I think that was a Thursday. I said, I want a dry run starting Monday. And that's exactly what happened. So we called in some disaster contracts that we have in place for hurricanes and said, you have tents, right? Yes. You have computers, you've got Wi-Fi, you've got all these things. And they said, yes. We flipped that switch on that contract, and they started erecting tents and putting together the infrastructure at a county park on Sunday. And we dry ran that program Monday. So that's what I talk about, being trained in absolute chaos paid off right there, because we did have an incredibly efficient mass vaccination program that we ran for several months. Could not thank the volunteers that staffed those sites enough. We could not have done it without them. As any business owner can appreciate, you have a carrot and stick incentive. And our carrot was, we actually didn't use a stick. Our carrot was, if you will come volunteer one day, you're at the front of the line for the vaccines. And I know we had a van full of, I think it was American Airlines flight attendants, drove down from Dallas, volunteered for the day, got their shot, went back to Dallas. So the volunteers were great. We, to my knowledge, never threw away a single dose of vaccine. We were able to either get it down to the last one, or we had a sign that we did not make public, and the sign flashed along Highway 3, vaccines here, no appointment necessary. And so if we had 5, 10, 12 left over, we flashed that sign on, got them in the line, ran out, and then turned it off. So we had again a national really a program that was a national model. And again, we had people come down and say, okay, how do we do this back where we are? And we showed them what we had set up, and I hope it was duplicated. Where we stand now is that there's no wait for testing or vaccines. So if you want one, it's readily available. We're now actually implementing the booster program. I know that was up and running as of Monday for sure. And those are recommendations from your provider. If your provider or you think it's a good idea, it's there for you. So we would like to think that we have been at the cutting edge of getting the testing and the vaccine program out and available to those who want it. I think one of our challenges now, there are some small communities who don't want it. Well, we can't force it on them. So all we can really do as government officials is make it available, and we've done that. So I'm real happy with the work that our staff has done. I think we've done a good job, probably as good as could be done. Again, no playbook, but that's where we stand. I'm not a virologist. I don't even play a good doctor on television. So I have to defer to them. You know, their consistent message to me is these variants will come. They will probably be more transmissible, but not as severe. That's what they tell me. I don't have any reason to doubt them. And that does appear to be what we're seeing. We are not having hospital capacity issues. I think everyone is experiencing staff issues. So we have done our best to try to get the staffing at the county hospital. The county didn't have a hospital, but at hospitals in the county. And we asked them to let us know if they're having trouble staffing those. So I think that's where we are. You know, we have to look at others, mostly overseas, to see, because they're a few weeks ahead of us and they seem to be tapering off now. I know that our county count had been around 300 for about 10 days in a row. Yesterday it was 196. That's just one day, but at least one day we have the right trend in the right direction. So I guess time will tell where we go from here, and hopefully we learn some lessons as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. And fingers crossed that numbers continue to start dropping off. I do want to express my appreciation. I was vaccinated at the Walter Hall Park. That was one of the Galveston County ones in partnership with UTMB. The process was flawless both times I went through there. And a huge thank you to the folks that were on the ground there working that, but Judge Henry Yu and the team that helped pull that together, the UTMB folks, just a big appreciation for me. Next topic, wanted to dive into a little bit. I know you're in the midst and almost to the conclusion of the county budget season, which I know can be an exciting one. Can you talk a little bit about how that's going, what you're focused on, what some of the big items in the budget are, just sort of your view of the landscape?
This is our operating budget. Our operating budget runs around $150 million a year. It's funded almost exclusively through ad valorem tax. We have been successful in reducing the tax rate every year since I've been here, and that'll be continued on this year. We're reducing the tax rate by right around 5 cents per hundred, which is pretty significant. What we don't control, that I like to point out, is your assessment. And I am a victim of this crazy assessment program, as everyone else is. That is completely state-run, state-controlled. We wish the state would get a handle on their assessment and appraisal system, but they don't seem to have an appetite for that at the moment. We can't cut the tax rate steep enough to keep up with the inflated assessments and appraisals. But having said all that, we have a good solid budget. It enables us to keep our AAA bond rating, one of the few counties in Texas along the coast that has a AAA bond rating. That's a result of, they see year after year being responsible, having a significant reserve in a fund balance, and managing our debt. We've also reduced debt down by about 40% since I got elected. And that's after we issued another bond issue. And that's kind of significant for the financial geeks out there. You know, if we have a good bond rating, when we have to issue bonds, then we get the lowest interest rate that anyone's going to be able to realistically get. So that helps us save money there, paying less in interest than a comparable county without a AAA bond rating. Where do we go? A little bit different in Galveston County. We have really taken the lead on bond reform, or bail reform, however you want to call that, starting probably 3 or 4 years ago. It is a problem in other counties. It is a problem everywhere. We're just, I think, far more proactive in getting a handle on it. And to that end, one of the a few additional staff spots that we added this year were bond supervision officers. So if you get arrested for a non-violent offense, and it's almost always possession of controlled substance, so drug possession, we're going to be able to release you with an ankle monitor, a GPS monitor, send you on your way. And that's great for a number of reasons, but mostly that it costs us about $100 a day to keep someone in the county jail, and it costs us about $400 a month to keep a GPS monitor on them. So from a strictly financial standpoint, they are, far less expensive on a GPS ankle monitor. But more importantly, a lot of these people, I'm a magistrate judge. I go to the jail and do this job occasionally. A lot of them say I'm going to lose my job, and they are. I mean, if they don't show up to work for a couple of days, they're going to lose their job. And certainly if the employer finds out why they were in my county jail, they're going to lose their job. So we're trying to stop that cycle. If he loses or she loses their job, they're not going to be able to pay their court fees. They're not going to be able to hire an attorney. And it's kind of a snowballing effect. And that's why I think we're far ahead of some other counties in trying to get a handle on trying to build a better system that keeps nonviolent offenders out of our county jail, reducing our costs, keeping them intact with their family, keeping them employed where they need to be employed, and hopefully having a better outcome, and really finding a solution for their actual issue, which wasn't possessing the drugs that was being addicted to them in the first place. So trying to find alternative ways to deal with problems. And that's also something I deal with in Veterans Treatment Court, which, just real briefly, a veteran gets arrested almost always for DWI. And it's because they're self-medicating to address their post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So they go to jail, and the DA on a first-time offense probably would offer them something like 3 or 4 days time served. Well, they still have PTSD. We didn't do anything for the actual problem. So our treatment program is a year long, which is far more than the 3 or 4 days they might have been offered. And they have to address the PTSD, get an approved medication and therapy plan in place from a provider from the VA. So that's a much smaller component of a bigger issue we're trying to address locally, and that is trying to treat people who need treatment rather than just incarcerate them. But again, these are limited to nonviolent, typically substance abuse and mental disorder issues.
Awesome. Great. It's great to hear things like that in programs working out where not only are they effective, but cost savings to taxpayers. So great to hear. Another big issue and timely in that yesterday was the 4th anniversary of Hurricane Harvey making landfall in the state of Texas, August 25th, 2017. Drainage and working to get water out of neighborhoods and out of areas where people congregate and back out into the Gulf and other places. I know there's been a ton of work in the county in terms of resolving that and making progress on drainage issues. But can you talk about the latest findings that y'all have had, what you're working on, and how we're doing?
Sure. And that seems like such an easy thing. Hey, I want the water to drain faster. Okay, that seems easy enough. It just isn't. The challenge is that so much of the conveyance of water doesn't start in Galveston County or Harris County. It starts further upstream. So we're trying to address an issue that is multi-county at best. It could be dozens of counties, and we would like for them all to participate. But we don't necessarily need them to do that. We can convey water locally, which will make some impact. We don't always know exactly how much until we have another Harvey, which we hope we don't have, honestly. One good thing that we did just complete a drainage study. That drainage study gave us projects and kind of scored them. So that's good, because we don't want to spend a lot of money on a project that's going to have minimal benefit. We want to spend minimal money on the maximum benefit and then to work our way back from there. What we did not anticipate was the $66 million in ARPA funds that we were just given a couple of months ago. Already have our first payment. So the Commissioner's Court agreed unanimously, really. We had a couple of things that we had to pay for that were COVID related from the ARPA funds, and that was an approved use. And after that, almost all of that money is being spent on drainage. So it was very timely that we had this study wrap up right about the time that we got some unexpected money from the federal government, which our kids will have to pay back, to be honest. But regardless, we'll use it largely for those drainage projects and moving that water better as best we can. And I tell people, you've got to be realistic. We're 4 to 8 feet above sea level. There's only so fast that water is going to move. We're on a mountain, different story, but we're going to do what we can to build some detention in, to hold it while it tries to drain, and then drainage projects as well. So we're well aware. I was here for Harvey. I spent about 4 or 5 days in our emergency management office on 646. We know what a worst case scenario looks like, and we will do our best to mitigate that with our study and the funds we just got. Try to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Terrific, thank you. Similar to, or sort of connected to drainage issues is one of the causes from them. I know prior to jumping on, we had talked briefly about disturbances, weather disturbances out in the Gulf. Can you talk about what you're hearing from your emergency management folks, kind of what your the track projections are right now and what folks should be doing to get ready in case it does decide to make its way towards Houston and Galveston?
Let me go backwards, because we sing this song all year long. Make a kit and have a plan, and those things are, seems easy enough. Well, I can make a kit tomorrow. No, please make one now. And I'll tell people, the things that people always forget in your kit are prescription medications and what to do with your pets. So those are the two things that I harp on constantly. You'll need, if you have 7 days of prescription medication, that's probably your worst case scenario. And then your pets, if you've got German Shepherds and you're planning to evacuate to your sister's apartment in San Antonio, that doesn't sound like a plan that's going to be workable to me. So just make sure you've kind of dry run that, walked through it, called wherever you intend to go, said, hey, it would be okay if I brought my animals and so forth. So I get those things done first. As far as the county, we're very lucky. The county has the National Weather Service as a tenant of ours, and it's at our emergency management building on 646. So when we go there, we literally can walk across the hall and get with Dan Riley, the chief meteorologist, or somebody who's on duty over there at the time. It's a 24-hour operation, and say, tell me, give me an assessment. Other entities are kind of limited to waiting for their next scheduled conference call. We don't have to do that. That's important because we are going to be the first county along the coastline impacted here. So looking at this one, and believe me, we track every single disturbance that comes anywhere near the United States. So one time, I think it was 3 years ago, we were tracking 9 disturbances at one time. That's what we do. And this 99 is what it was called up until a couple hours ago. It's now Tropical Depression Ida. We have been tracking it since its first forecast was Brownsville, Texas. It has slowly moved, actually not that slowly, it's moved to the east consistently. Most of the models now are in agreement that it will pick up speed and actually be a very fast moving hurricane, which is good on a number of levels, and probably impact the New Orleans area with minimal or no impact at all to Texas at all, much less Galveston County. So we're real lucky to have National Weather Service. We can get those updates pretty real time. They've got a very impressive weather monitoring and forecasting station in there. And I always give them a shout out. So next time you hear a tornado warning or a thunderstorm warning has been issued by the National Weather Service in League City, that's where it's coming from. And those are the folks that we're getting our almost minute by minute up to date information. And I will tell you, during Harvey, it wasn't great, but when they would tell me how serious it was, I could see that they were serious. It was not, well, I've got to do my job and tell you it might be 50 inches of rain. No, they were believing it was going to be that much. So that's helpful in us in trying to convey a sense of urgency and a sense of this is serious. We are not just trying to get you to listen to us with bad sounding things. It's really going to happen. So lucky to have them there. Glad they're a partner of ours. I made a pitch to a couple of members of Congress probably 2 years ago now, and I told them you need to have every single National Weather Service in an emergency management building with a county official. That will tremendously reduce impacts of storms and other problems that you can mitigate that you wouldn't be able to otherwise because of the disconnect of having to have somebody like me wait for the next regularly scheduled weather update.
Understand, it makes sense. The next question I want to talk about is transportation, certainly something that's important for evacuation routes, but also just for our day-to-day lives in Galveston County. Can you talk about some of the projects that you're watching, what folks should be getting ready for and on the lookout for? What's happening in the world of transportation?
A very good question. And the problem is that we have to work on roads such as I-45 while people are still trying to use them. The plan, people always say they didn't build it big enough. Well, no, they didn't. When they built it 4 lanes or 6 lanes, the county had 150,000 residents, and that was more than enough. Would those residents have wanted to build a 10-lane Interstate 45 that has to be maintained every year because someday they might need them? Probably not. So that's our challenge. Galveston County is growing pretty rapidly, and it's seen every day on the freeways. We do have ongoing construction on I-45. I-45 will be significantly widened and improved all the way down to Galveston Island. That project really started a couple of years ago. They're now in the Dickinson to Texas City area. Ongoing construction. There's not much we can do about it except try to live through it. I will tell everyone this: in the event that a hurricane gets in the Gulf, we can get on the phone with TxDOT and ask them to stop everything for our evacuation route. Same with 146. There's pretty significant construction, if you haven't noticed, at the Kemah area where they're putting in a new bridge. That will be a tremendous improvement once it's finished. At the moment, it's a little bit of a pain, but again, we can stop all of that and get it to become an evacuation route. So Galveston County has 3 primary evacuation routes: I-45 first and foremost, Highway 146 second, and Highway 6 third. We always talk about that because these are regular transportation routes in addition to being evacuation routes. They have to serve both functions when the time comes. So we do our best to keep ahead of the expansion and maintenance needs. We can't always do that. There are limitations, and I try to tell people for me to take on one big project a year is about right. We just don't have enough people to take on 10 at one time. So we do the best we can do, and we hopefully get ahead of it. But transportation is a challenge, certainly in a county that's growing as rapidly as we are. And I think the entire region is going to have the continued explosive growth for a number of reasons: climate, favorable business conditions, favorable state politics, some other things like that. So I think it's something we have to get used to as best we can. If most of you have driven the portion of Beltway 8, or not Beltway 8, of I-45 now, certainly from 518 up to Bay Area Boulevard, that's gotten tremendously better since they finished there and moved down south now. So we expect to have all of that done, but I'm just like everyone else. I got caught in the traffic Monday trying to get to Commissioner's Court. So it's a necessary evil, but that's the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future. I think we don't wrap up 45 until 2026. That sounds right.
Thank you. Judge, final question, and an easy one. We only have a minute or so left for it, though. I know how important county business is and how important local political work is. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important to you and why our members should be paying attention to what's going on in county government?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I've said this so many times: if you don't work for or with county government, you don't know much about it. And county government will impact your life far more than the White House will. The way to get involved is to just get to know your people, your tax assessor, your county judge, your county commissioner. You all have one. They're going to have more of an impact on your life than anyone else is, probably. County government is unique. You're probably all familiar with your city council, your mayor, and your city government. They only have the elected officials on city council. We have 33, I believe it is, different elected officials. They don't report to me. They report to the people who elected them. So it's an interesting animal for sure. It's great. I really enjoy county government, and I can't imagine doing anything else, but it is not well understood. We run the county jail. We run the DA's office. We run the court system. Anything higher than a Class C misdemeanor has to be handled through the county. So it's a lot that could or will impact your life at one point or another. I certainly encourage you to get to know your elected officials at the county level, get involved, and when you don't like someone, help get them out of there.
Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for your leadership in the county, and appreciate you being on with us today.
Thanks, Brian.
A few housekeeping notes before we depart. First, a big thank you again to our friends at CenterPoint Energy for sponsoring today. A couple of events coming up that I want to make sure are on everybody's radar. September 29th, General Membership Luncheon is going to feature the new Johnson Space Center Center Director, Vanessa Weish, who's a fantastic speaker, and hope to see you there. On September 30th, the next one-on-one conversation will be with Glenn Hammer, the new president and CEO of the Texas Association of Business. And finally, October 1st is the 59th annual Chairman's Ball at South Shore Harbor Resort. I hope everyone has a great afternoon, and thank you for joining us today.